Have you ever wondered what it takes to perfect the art of the steal? Not with a gun or a crowbar, but with a smile, a story, and an unshakable confidence that could convince a man to buy something that was never for sale. Imagine a criminal so audacious. He sold the Eiffel Tower not once but twice. This isn't fiction. This is the world of a man who wrote his own rules for deception, a chilling set of guidelines that have become the stuff of legend, known as the 10 Commandments for con artists. Our story begins in the Roaring '20s, a time of excess and ambition. In the spring of 1925, a small group of Paris's most powerful scrap metal dealers received a very discreet and official-looking invitation. They were summoned to a secret meeting at the prestigious Hotel de Crillon to discuss a matter of national importance. The host was a man of supposed aristocratic bearing, introducing himself as a Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs. His name, he claimed, was Count Victor Lustig, and he had a proposition that would stun them into silence. The investigation into Victor Lustig wasn't a typical police procedural with chalk outlines and fingerprints. How do you investigate a ghost? For years, law enforcement on 2 continents chased a phantom who moved through high society like smoke. He used over 40 aliases, possessed a dozen passports, and spoke 5 languages fluently. The challenge wasn't finding clues, it was defining the crime. His victims were often too embarrassed to admit they'd been swindled, allowing Lustig to simply vanish, leaving behind nothing but a fantastic story and an empty wallet, perfectly adhering to his first commandment: be a patient listener. The breakthrough in Lustig's long and illustrious career of deception came not from a brilliant detective, but from a jealous lover and a single, foolish mistake. In the 1930s, Lustig had entered the lucrative but dangerous world of counterfeiting. He was so good that his fake $100 bills, known as Lustig money, threatened to destabilize the American economy. He had a partner, but when Lustig began an affair with the partner's mistress, the scorned woman anonymously tipped off the federal authorities. It was a simple, human error of passion that finally put a name and a face to the ghost the Secret Service had been hunting for years. On May 10, 1935, federal agents finally cornered Victor Lustig in New York. His capture was just the beginning of the final act. In a move that cemented his legend, Lustig staged a daring escape from the Federal House of Detention in Manhattan a day before his trial, using a rope made of bedsheets. He was recaptured a month later in Pittsburgh. His subsequent trial was a spectacle, but the evidence was overwhelming. He was convicted on counterfeiting charges and sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, with an additional 5 years for his jailbreak. The final destination for the world's most charming con man was the inescapable island of Alcatraz. Count Victor Lustig died of pneumonia in 1947, a prisoner in a medical facility for federal inmates. He left behind no fortune, no estate, only a legacy as perhaps the most brilliant and audacious con artist in history. His story serves as a chilling blueprint for the art of deception. His 10 Commandments, a list found in his effects upon his death, have been studied by law enforcement and criminals alike. They are a haunting reminder that the most dangerous weapon in the world is not a gun, but a well-told lie, forcing us to ask, how many Victor Lustigs are still out there, living by his code? To understand the master, one must understand his rules. The first, and perhaps most crucial, was be a patient listener. Lustig understood that people are desperate to talk about themselves. He would let his targets, or marks, ramble on, revealing their hopes, their fears, and most importantly, their greed. He wasn't just hearing them. He was gathering intelligence, looking for the cracks in their armor, the desires he could exploit. He made them feel like the most important person in the room, creating a foundation of trust that he would later demolish for profit. His second commandment was just as insightful: never look bored. To Lustig, every conversation was a performance. He maintained intense eye contact, nodded at the right moments, and showed genuine fascination, even when the topic was mundane. This unwavering attention was a powerful tool. It flattered his marks, making them feel intelligent and respected. It disarmed their natural skepticism and drew them deeper into his web. In a world full of distractions, the person who gives you their complete attention is the person you instinctively want to trust. Lustig mastered this completely. Wait for the other person to reveal any political opinions, then agree with them. This was Lustig's third rule, a masterclass in social Chameleonism. He knew that arguing about politics was a fool's errand that created division. Instead, he molded his own persona to perfectly mirror his target. Was the Mark a staunch conservative? So was Lustig. A passionate liberal, Lustig shared his fervor. By aligning himself with their core beliefs, he created an instant, powerful bond. He wasn't just a business acquaintance, he was a kindred spirit, a man who got it. This tactic bypassed logic and went straight for the heart. The fourth commandment was about building suspense. Let the other person reveal their religious views, then have the same ones. Much like his rule on politics, Lustig treated religion as another tool for manipulation. He understood the deeply personal and emotional nature of faith. By claiming to share the same spiritual beliefs, he established a profound level of intimacy and trust with his marks. This wasn't just about agreeing. It was about connecting on a level that transcended business. It made him appear as a man of principle and shared values, making his eventual betrayal all the more devastating and unbelievable. Hint at sex, but do not follow it up unless the other person shows a strong indication of it. Here, Lustig walked a delicate tightrope. His fifth rule recognized the power of suggestion, an unspoken desire. He was a man of immense charm, and he used flirtation as a subtle instrument to keep his marks, both male and female, off balance and intrigued. It created an undercurrent of excitement and possibility in their interactions. However, he was a professional, and he knew that complicating a financial con with a messy affair was risky. The hint was enough. It added spice to the deception without compromising the objective. The sixth rule speaks to the core of the con: never discuss illness unless some special concern is shown. Lustig's world was one of opulence, success, and boundless optimism. Talk of sickness or misfortune punctured that illusion. It introduced a note of unpleasant reality into the fantasy he was carefully constructing for his victim. He was selling a dream, a golden opportunity, and dreams are not populated by ailments or complaints. By keeping the conversation light and positive, he maintained control of the atmosphere, ensuring his mark remained focused on the bright, prosperous future he was offering them. Never pry into a person's personal circumstances. They will tell you all eventually. This was Lustig's seventh commandment, a testament to his supreme confidence and patience. He never needed to force a door open. He knew his victims would willingly give him the key. By creating an aura of a trustworthy confidant, he simply had to wait. People yearned to be understood, to share their burdens and their secrets. Lustig positioned himself as the perfect sympathetic ear, and his marks would inevitably volunteer all the personal information he needed to tailor the final stages of the con to their specific vulnerabilities. His eighth rule was one of self-discipline: never boast. Just let your importance be obvious. Lustig never needed to announce his supposed wealth or connections. He demonstrated it. He stayed at the finest hotels, wore the most exquisite clothes, and spoke with an air of quiet, aristocratic authority. His props, the custom-made suits, the flawless manners, the vague references to powerful friends, did the boasting for him. This subtlety was far more effective than overt bragging. which can often seem desperate. It allowed his marks to conclude on their own that they were dealing with a man of immense substance and importance. Never be untidy. This was Lustig's 9th commandment, and it was about more than just personal grooming. It was about perfection in every detail of his presentation. His clothes were always immaculate, his shoes polished, his mannerisms refined. This meticulousness extended to his props, the forged documents, the official-looking letters, the cleverly designed money-printing machines. An untidy appearance or a sloppy forgery could shatter the illusion in an instant. For Lustig, neatness was a critical component of credibility. It signaled a man who was in control, successful and trustworthy in all things, large and small. The final commandment was the most chilling of all: never get drunk. For Victor Lustig, the con was a 24-hour-a-day performance. It required constant vigilance, a sharp memory, and absolute control over his words and actions. Alcohol was the enemy of that control. A single slip of the tongue, a moment of unguarded honesty fueled by liquor, could bring his entire carefully constructed world crashing down. He might share a glass of champagne with a mark to build rapport, but he was always the soberest man in the room, his mind clear, calculating, and focused on the prize. Let's return to Paris in 1925 and the Eiffel Tower. Lustig explained to the assembled scrap metal dealers that the iconic landmark, built only for the 1889 World's Fair, was never meant to be permanent. The maintenance costs, he sighed, had become astronomical. The city had made the difficult decision to tear it down and sell it for scrap. The deal had to be kept in absolute secrecy to avoid public outcry. He was in charge of selecting the dealer who would get the lucrative contract. The bait was set, glistening with the promise of 7,000 tons of iron. He took the dealers on a tour of the tower, speaking with authority about structural weaknesses and logistical challenges. He was playing the part of a harried, overworked government official. Later, he accepted sealed bids. He already knew his mark, an ambitious but insecure dealer named André Poisson. Poisson was new to the Parisian business scene and desperate to make a name for himself. Lustig sensed this insecurity, this deep need for validation. Poisson wasn't just buying scrap metal, he was buying his way into the big leagues. This was the vulnerability Lustig had been waiting for. During a private meeting, Poisson expressed a slight hesitation. This was the critical moment. A lesser con man might have pushed harder, but Lustig played his part to perfection. He sighed, confessing that, as a simple government official, his salary was not enough to maintain the lifestyle he desired. The hint was subtle but clear. Poisson, familiar with the whispers of corruption in the government, understood immediately. This wasn't just a business deal, it was a deal that required a little extra encouragement. The bribe sealed it. It made the deal feel real, illicit, and therefore authentic. Poisson paid Lustig the hefty bribe, and the full amount for the 7,000 tons of scrap iron. Lustig, with his suitcase full of cash, promptly took a train to Vienna and vanished. He read the French newspapers daily, waiting for the inevitable story of the massive fraud to break. But it never came. André Poisson was so utterly humiliated at being fooled by such an audacious scam that he never reported the crime to the police. For Lustig, this was the perfect outcome. The silence of his victim meant he was free to do it all over again. And he did. A month later, Count Victor Lustig returned to Paris, gathered a different group of scrap metal dealers at a different luxury hotel, and sold the Eiffel Tower for a second time. This time, however, his chosen mark went to the police before the deal was finalized. But by the time the authorities arrived at his hotel suite, Lustig was already gone, having fled to America with his pockets full once more. The legend of the man who sold the Eiffel Tower was born, a story that would echo through the annals of crime for a century. In America, Lustig continued his reign, moving from one scam to another with fluid ease. One of his most famous was the Rumanian Box. It was a marvel of deceptive engineering, a small, ornate cedar box that Lustig claimed could perfectly duplicate any currency using a special chemical process. He would demonstrate it, inserting a $100 bill, and after a period of several hours, two identical bills would emerge. The trick was simple. He had a bill hidden in a secret compartment, but his performance was masterful. He would sell these boxes for enormous sums, sometimes as much as $10,000. The catch was that the duplication process took 6 hours. This gave him a generous head start to get out of town before his victims discovered that the box was just an inert piece of wood, now containing only their original bill and a few blank pieces of paper. The scam was brilliant because it preyed on the ultimate form of greed, the desire to literally create money from nothing. This particular con, however, once brought him face to face with true danger. A sheriff in Oklahoma, a man named Richards, bought a box. When it inevitably failed to work, the sheriff, unlike Lustig's usual marks, was not embarrassed. He was furious. He tracked Lustig down to Chicago. Lustig, cornered, could have been killed. But instead of running, he masterfully turned the tables. He convinced the sheriff that he had been operating the machine incorrectly, berating him for his incompetence. He then gave the sheriff his money back and sent him on his way, completely flustered and apologetic. Lustig's supreme confidence even allowed him to swindle one of the most dangerous men in America, the gangster Al Capone. As the legend goes, Lustig approached Capone with a proposition, asking for a $50,000 investment for a brilliant stock scheme. Lustig simply put the money in a safe deposit box and left it there for 2 months. He then returned to Capone, apologized profusely, and explained that the deal had fallen through. He returned the full $50,000. Capone, who had fully expected to lose the money, was so impressed by Lustig's apparent honesty that he gave him $5,000 as a reward. But it was the counterfeiting operation that would be his undoing. The scale was unprecedented. He partnered with a chemist and a skilled engraver, creating plates for $100 bills that were nearly indistinguishable from the real thing. They flooded the country with millions of dollars in fake currency. The Secret Service, tasked with protecting the integrity of American money, formed a special task force led by Agent Peter Rubano. For Rubano, catching this counterfeiter became a personal obsession, a hunt for a man who seemed to be a genius living on the wrong side of the law. The tip from the jealous mistress gave the feds the break they needed. They learned his name, his habits, and his likely locations. When they finally captured him, they found a key in his wallet that led them to a locker in a Times Square subway station. Inside, they found the perfectly engraved counterfeiting plates and $51,000 in fake bills. The evidence was undeniable. But even in custody, Lustig's mind was already working, plotting his next move, which would be his most theatrical escape. From his window at the Federal House of Detention, he noticed a flaw. The guards never looked up. He began tearing his bedsheets and towels into thin strips, meticulously braiding them into a rope. On the day before his trial, he complained of a sudden illness, and when the guard's attention was elsewhere, he slipped out of his cell. He shimmied down his makeshift rope from the window, landing on the street below. He took a theatrical bow to the stunned onlookers and casually walked away, melting into the New York crowds. The escape made him a media sensation. His freedom, however, was short-lived. The manhunt was massive. 27 days later, FBI agents cornered him again in Pittsburgh after a high-speed car chase. This time, there would be no escape. The trial was swift. The judge, perhaps unimpressed by his charm, sentenced him to a long stretch on the most secure island prison in the world, Alcatraz. On the Rock, he was no longer the Count. He was prisoner AZ-300, his world of luxury and illusion reduced to a cold 6 by 9 foot cell. Even in Alcatraz, his mind never stopped working. He was known as a quiet, resourceful prisoner who offered his fellow inmates shrewd legal advice and taught classes on foreign languages. He was a model inmate, but the years of confinement took their toll on his health. The man who had lived by his wits, who had charmed millions out of gangsters and businessmen alike, was slowly fading away, a relic of a bygone era of gentlemen criminals. His 10 Commandments remain his most enduring legacy. They are a chilling look into the psychology of manipulation. They reveal a man who saw human nature not as something to be celebrated, but as a series of predictable weaknesses to be systematically exploited. He understood pride, greed, loneliness, and the desperate need to believe in something extraordinary. He didn't just sell a story, he sold a reflection of his victims' own deepest desires back to them. The story of Victor Lustig is a cautionary tale, a reminder of the vulnerability that lies within all of us. He operated in a time before the internet, before digital footprints and global surveillance. He was a master of a dying art form. Yet his principles of deception are timeless. They are used today by email scammers, online romance fraudsters, and purveyors of fake news. The technology has changed, but the methods of exploiting human trust and greed remain eerily the same. In the end, we are left to wonder about the man behind the 40 aliases. Was Victor Lustig a genius who chose the wrong path, or simply a man with no conscience? His life was a grand performance, a series of carefully crafted illusions. And like all great illusions, it leaves us questioning what is real and what is not, and just how easily we, too, could be persuaded to buy something that was never for sale.